Hi, good evening to all of you. Today, as part of our special class on Unacademy platform, YouTube platform, Unlock YouTube platform, we shall be discussing about disaster management. What is this disaster management? Why this disaster management has been a failure in India? That's what we will be looking at. Before starting our class, let us look at the classes that are being launched by Unacademy now. You can see here, these are all the top rankers from Unacademy this year. Second ranker, ninth ranker, 10th ranker, 13th, 14th, 16th, and 20th ranker. And uh, it has Unacademy has extended 3 months this 1 year and above GS and plus combo subscriptions for 1 year. 3 months free extension was given. And if you subscribe between 24th and 30th of November, that is in this week, you will get all those benefits also. So you can go and subscribe. Apart from all these things, if you subscribe with our code PKS10, you will also get a 10% additional discount also. And then you have seen here, the combo, say one combo, 25% with optional plus 10% using referral code. Flat 2,500 off is 2,500 rupees off. Offer duration is 25th to 30th November. And it is if you take the GS plus optional 1 year, old price is 77,000. Now it has come down to 55,204, which is very less compared to what you can see in Delhi or in physical classes. You don't get one single option also for this amount. You're getting GS and optional combo also. And courses that are launched at Unacademy, optional courses. You can see here, there is our course also, Public Administration 2022. And we have started from 24th November. And you can join any of these courses with our code PKS10. You can join any of these options. You can join sociology, agriculture, political science, public administration, and then geomorphology. Right. Proceeding further, these are the batches which are starting from 1st of December. You have a mains comprehensive batch, course for GS, UPSC CSE, batches for UPSC CSE 2023 also, starting from 1st of December. And as you can see here, 1st of December to 31st of March 2022. Then these are all the different courses that are there on Unacademy platform. You can see all of them. The examination of civil services prelims is on 5th June 2022. Then Mission Air 1 batch from 10th June 2022 to 10th September 2022. The examination of mains is on 16th September. This is the calendar of UPSC. You will also have a free test series for UPSC examination. As part of Unacademy Combat, you have 7 rounds, 56 questions. You have daily current affairs and then Abhiyan also. Then you have UPSC CSE Mega Combat. You have 56 questions and 60 minutes. This is on 28th November, 11 o'clock. And there are more than 6 crore scholarship to be won with top rankers, with top 1 to 3 rankers are getting what you call complete free scholarship for the examination. Then you also have other courses. So this is what you can see Unacademy is offering, and you will also get this set of 20 GS books curated by the top educators of Unacademy as per the latest trend of UPSC. And you will get them only with 1 year and above GS and combo subscription. So this is what all the courses offered by Unacademy. So let us come back and look at, and then you also have this iconic subscription benefit in the form of personal guidance, study planner, live mentoring, test analysis, experts guidance, live classes, and weekly tests, study material, unlimited access, structured courses. So these are all the courses that are offered on an Unacademy platform. Let us come back and look at what we are discussing now. Let us come back and look at what we have to discuss now today. You can ask me your questions also. Today we'll look at one of the most important topics in our journal today's why disaster management in India is a failure and what should be done. What should be done to ensure the success of disaster management in India. Why it is a failure and what should be done. Just a minute. Why disaster management is a failure and what should be done. That is what we have to look at. So first and foremost, we have to know what is exactly this disaster and what are the different types of disaster. What is disaster management? Why disaster management in India is not as successful as it should have been, and what can be the solutions. What we will do is that we will try to answer all these questions with the help of relevant examples also, because if you look at in our general studies paper 3 as well as in your Indian administration, every year what they do is they will ask a lot of specific disasters and what can be done and what should be done. So when we talk about disaster, what exactly is a disaster? Any event which has catastrophic consequences can be called a disaster. Any event which results in unimaginable consequences can be called a disaster. That is what we say. And there are two different types of disasters. We say natural disasters and man-made disasters. As the name itself indicates, what is natural disaster and what is man-made disaster? As the name itself indicates, natural disaster means a disaster which is caused by the nature over which we don't have any control. As human beings, we don't have any control. For example, earthquakes, cyclones, tsunamis, then there's floods, cloudbursts. These are all what we call natural disasters. We don't have any control over them because they're caused by the nature. Take the case of a spread of corona. Still, we don't know whether corona is a natural disaster or man-made disaster because still we don't know whether this coronavirus was manufactured in Wuhan labs or was it a natural disaster. But what we know is that definitely, corona had originated in China. That much we can know. So then, what are man-made disasters? Man-made disasters means those disasters which are created by human beings deliberately or consciously or otherwise. Deliberately or consciously or otherwise through their actions. They are called what we call man-made disasters. And what are the examples of these man-made disasters? Pollution. Right now you can see in Delhi when you go out, even now also, it is so polluted that you cannot even see the other person also. Pollution. Then this forest fires, deforestation, and the spread of viruses. Then terrorism, Naxalism, caste-based conflicts, and there's a deforestation. These are all what we call man-made disasters. We are responsible for these disasters. Environmental degradation, raising the levels of this chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs. These are all what we call man-made disasters. These disasters are created by human beings because of their greed. Because of their greed. As Mahatma Gandhi would always say, our earth has enough resources to satisfy the needs of everyone, but not the greed of anyone. So whether it is a natural disaster or a man-made disaster, what you must look at is how to manage those disasters. That is the most important thing that we have to look at here. How to manage those disasters. Disaster management becomes an integral part of the developmental activity of any country in the world, especially in the last 30 years. What globalization has done is that this globalization has made the people of the world realize the consequences of disasters. It has made people of the world also bear the consequences of disasters, both natural as well as man-made. It has resulted in environmental degradation, and we are witnessing the consequences also. The so-called natural disasters are no longer natural; they are man-made only. America is witnessing a severe cyclones, what we call them in America hurricanes. Europe in recent times has witnessed so much of floods. So is the case with most of the cities in India. Even now also Chennai is still again underwater. Most of Andhra Pradesh is still underwater. Why? Because these are all what we call at the end of the day man-made disasters. This cloud burst and everything else. So what we have to do? We have to think about how to reduce the impact of these disasters. We have to think about how to, how we can eliminate these disasters. We have to think about, how to mitigate the impact of these disasters. That is what we have to think about. What are the disasters? It can be cloudburst, it can be earthquake, it can be floods, it can be this environmental degradation, it can be forest fires, anything else. What can be done? That is the reason why disaster management becomes very important. According to United Nations, every $1 spent on preventing the disaster, we are saving at least $12 on post-disaster management. That is the reason why disaster management becomes very, very important. If you are spending $1 to mitigate or to reduce the impact or to eliminate the disaster, you are saving $12 on disaster management, post-disaster management in the form of response. For example, America is losing billions and billions of dollars every year to disasters. Every year, it is losing billions of dollars to disasters. In case of India, if you happen to read the newspapers, they said that because of the high levels of pollution in Delhi, in the last few years, Delhi has lost thousands of crores of rupees of tourism. Who wants to come to Delhi with so much of pollution? Nobody wants. Delhi hotel industry has become almost defunct because of this high levels of pollution. So when we talk about development, it is closely linked to disaster management. In disaster management, we talk about four important steps in disaster management, which we call it as a disaster cycle also. It is cyclical in nature. At the end of the day, it is cyclical in nature. What are the four importance that you are talking about here, which you can see it on your screen also. First one is mitigation or prevention. Mitigation or prevention. So what are we talking about here as part of mitigation or prevention? What we are saying here? What we are saying here is that in case of natural disasters, we cannot prevent natural disasters. What can we do? At best, we can only reduce the impact of natural disasters. That is what we say mitigation. Mitigating the pain of the people, mitigating the troubles of the people, reducing the problems of people. We cannot eliminate them. Why? Because natural disasters are beyond human control. You cannot stop an earthquake. You cannot stop a cloudburst. But again, cloudburst is because of man-made disasters only. We are polluting so much of the environment that now no longer they can be called natural disasters. They are completely unnatural also. So what do we say here? What we say here is that we must, in case of natural disasters, reduce the impact. of disasters. How? For example, take an area which is earthquake prone. Take an area which is earthquake prone. Then what we have to do? You have to construct houses in such a manner that it can withstand earthquake of at least on a richer scale, at least 6 or 7 magnitude also. That is what is called mitigation. Take an area which is prone to floods. What you have to do? You have to construct houses at a much higher height so that the houses will not be flooded. Or you must make sure that the people of that locality are shifted to safer areas. This is what we say mitigation. This is what we say preventive measures. Similarly, the question that was asked in our general studies paper 3 sometime back, last year only, I think before last year, regarding these in hilly areas, what we are witnessing is there's a sudden collapse of the there's a big stones and everything. You have to mitigate the impact. Why it is happening? Because of this need or greed of the people. You are deliberately disturbing the ecological equilibrium. That is the reason why in mitigation itself, all the other measures that we talk about, COP26, Conference of Parties 26, recently talked about so many measures to mitigate the impact of disasters. But of course, at the end of the day, it was not successful. That's a different thing. They spoke about so many things, but did not come out with any proper action plan to realize all those objectives. So, when it comes to natural disasters, what can we say here is that when it comes to natural disasters, we must reduce the impact of natural disasters by taking proactive measures. Using technology, we can predict the cyclone. Right now, we can predict the cyclones to the last point also. The technology is developed so much that accurately we can predict the landfall of the cyclone. Accurately, we can predict the amount of rainfall of the cyclone. Accurately, we can predict the wind speed also through cyclones. What we have to do here, is that we must make sure that we are able to help those people who are living in low-lying areas using technology, so that we can reduce the impact of the disasters. I'll just give you an example here for this mitigation. I'll just give you one example here for this mitigation. What is this example that I can give you here? For example, in 1919, in Odisha, it has witnessed a very severe cyclone in 1999. When it had witnessed such a severe cyclone, yes, when it had witnessed such a severe cyclone, because there was no mitigation measures, more than 10,000 people died in the cyclone, which was very huge. But later, in 2015, 2016, later, Odisha had witnessed much severe cyclones. It had witnessed much, worse cyclones. Still, the loss to human life as well as property was minimal. Why? Because the government had taken measures to protect the lives of people as well as to protect the properties and of the people also. And that is what we say about mitigation. Very important. This mitigation we say as part of what we call proactive measures or preventive measures. And then in case of man-made disasters, what we must do is that in case of man-made disasters, we have to eliminate the risk of a disaster, of man-made disaster. What we call it as prevention. In case of man-made disasters, what is required is prevention. You must be in a position to prevent the disasters. Take the case of terror attacks. Now, what can you do with the better human intelligence at the ground level? Please remember, all these were asked in your examination. whatever I am discussing, all of them were asked in your general studies papers only. With better human intelligence at the ground level, what we can do? We can prevent terror attacks. You can read in the newspapers almost all the time that the government has prevented terror attacks. How? By developing human intelligence at the ground level. This is what we say prevention. These man-made disasters can easily be prevented with proactive measures on the part of the government. Deforestation can be prevented. Air pollution can be prevented. Water pollution can be prevented. Food poisoning can be prevented. These are all man-made disasters. Environmental degradation can be prevented. This is what we have to do. Very, very important. So this is the first step involved in what we call disaster management. From this, we can move on to the next step involved in disaster management, what is called preparedness. What is this preparedness that we are talking about? This is also proactive part of disaster management. That means what we have to do here is that you must prepare for the disasters. How? For example, you take the case of cyclones. You know that the cyclone will be crossing the coast at this particular point of time in that particular region. How do you prepare? First, you will have relief camps. You will be taking all those people who are living in low-lying areas and giving them shelters. Second, you have to give them food. Third, you have to ensure medicines because there is every possibility of waterborne diseases spreading after the cyclone. Fourth, you have to ensure the personal NDRF teams and SDRF teams also. This is what we call preparedness. Preparedness is, again, as I said, a proactive part of disaster management. Third thing, as we say about disaster management, is response. This is what we say. The first 24 hours of any disaster is very, very important, especially natural disasters. Why? Because in the first 24 hours only, we can save both the people as well as assets. In case of floods, we can save the lives of people only when in the first 24 hours. Same in the case with the assets or anything else. Immediate response is very, very vital, extremely important. The last one as part of disaster management is the last activity is what we call recovery and rehabilitation. The last one is recovery and rehabilitation. What are we saying here as part of recovery and rehabilitation? As part of immediate response, you are providing say shelter to them, you are giving them food, you are giving them medicines, everything fine. But you have to bring their backs onto normalcy again. For example, take a case of earthquake. Within 24 hours, you are able to save a lot of lives. You are putting them in what we call relief camps. And after that, what you have to do? After that, what you have to do is, after that, you have to just a minute.
तो वो 180 होनी चाहिए था बाद में
So what we are saying here is that this after giving them shelter, their houses are destroyed due to earthquake, their livelihood is lost, their professions are also destroyed, everything is over. So what you have to do as part of the government is you must ensure recovery and rehabilitation. This recovery and rehabilitation is what we call medium and long term in nature. Give them alternative sources of employment and construct houses for them. This time, construct houses for them, you know, so that those houses can withstand these earthquakes. They can withstand the earthquake. Tomorrow, if there is any earthquake in the same region, you must make sure that you are constructing houses for them with right. You must be constructing houses for them to withstand. That is what we call recovery and rehabilitation. And what we say that this is entire disaster management is what is called disaster cycle. This recovery and rehabilitation can help in mitigating the disasters, preventing the disasters. This is what we say broadly about disaster management. It includes these four important steps, right? Whether it is forest fires, whether it is earthquakes, whether it is cyclones, whether it is floods, whether it is deforestation, whether it is air pollution, whether it is terrorism, whether it is naxalism, whether it is caste violence, whether it is regionalism. These are all the different types of disasters. Now, in proceeding further, let us look at why disaster management in India is a failure. What is the reason why disaster management in India is a failure? That is what the topic that we have to discuss. Why it is a failure? We say that disaster management in India is failure because it is more of a management of disaster than disaster management. What is the meaning of the statement? It is more of management of disaster than disaster management. What we are saying here is that in the name of disaster management, in India, it is restricted only to what we call response, the one which we have spoken about previously. We have four steps in disaster management. You can see in India, disaster management is restricted to only response. Even this response itself is a disaster. Even this response itself is a disaster. That is where the problem is. Response itself is a disaster. Take a case of best example is, let us try to understand these things with the Corona crisis. We will be in a position to, understand these things in a more efficient, better manner. Unfortunately, take the case of Corona crisis. Was there any, what we call proactive measures on the part of the government? No, there were no proactive measures. Corona first had come in 2019 in November. First time it was discovered in 2019 November and December in China, 2 years back. And then 2020 March, the government had imposed strict lockdown. Right? I'm explaining why disaster management in India is a failure. We can understand these things, as I said, better with these kind of examples. So between December 2019 and March 2020, what did the government of India do? They did not nothing. They did nothing. The government was not even willing to acknowledge that Corona can be a problem. The President of America was coming. By the time in Europe, already the cases were increasing in Europe, in Italy and Russia, Europe. The government felt that it will not be there in India. So what happened? The government simply ignored it. President of America was coming. So the government was more interested in making arrangements for the visit of President of America than taking any proactive measures. The government did not even screen the people also. And we did not have any testing equipment also for Corona. Then suddenly what did the government do? It has imposed, one fine day the government decided that they would impose a strict lockdown. Strict lockdown was imposed. And what did the government do? The government had given only 4 hours of time for people to move. Strict lockdown, complete lockdown. It said that everyone should be staying where they are. This is where we say problem with disaster management in India. Why? Because in the name of disaster management, you are taking extreme measures which create more problems, which come in the way of solving the disaster rather than providing solutions. This is what we say in India. We always say that a natural disaster is always followed by man-made disaster. When the government imposed the strict lockdown with the best of intentions, the government said that they were imposing strict lockdown because we did not have any equipment to test. We don't have any medicine also, corona, vaccine was not there. And the government has said that they were forced to impose a lockdown because of the fact that we don't have any medical facilities. In the last 75 years or so, we have not spent, forget about enough amount of money, even minimum amount of money also on health infrastructure. We never felt. We never felt that a disaster of this kind can struck the country. So the government had no option but to impose strict lockdown. When the government imposed the strict lockdown in 2025, when the government imposed the strict lockdown in 2025, right, 2020, people were not at all prepared. And then what happened? The government did not even know that there are migrants also in the country, and lakh crores of them are working in other states. In South Africa also they have imposed lockdown, but South Africa, what they have done, they had given time to the people to move from one place to other place. They had given at least 15 days time. Then they imposed the lockdown. Whereas in India, the government has imposed lockdown without giving any kind of warning to the people. This is where again we say the problem with the disaster management in India. In the name of disaster management, most of the time what we have seen is that governments taking what we call extreme measures. And when people started walking hundreds of kilometers, again the government did not acknowledge the migrant crisis. It simply has refused to acknowledge the migrant crisis. The government has replied in the Supreme Court that there were no migrant crisis also. There was simply no crisis also. This is where again failure. Why? Because all the weaknesses of disaster management in India can be seen during Corona. One is our bureaucracy is simply not at all trained to perform disaster management functions. Our barbarian bureaucracy with colonial attitudes simply do not have either the skills or values or knowledge to manage disasters. On the other hand, this migrant crisis in a much worse manner was treated as a law and order problem. Police would beat up all the migrants, and the migrants, walking on the train lines to escape police beatings during the night. They were hit by the trains. So you can see that it was a complete mismanaged. After 2 months, the government has again relaxed the lockdown, and then what happened immediately? The disease has spread, corona has spread, and then the government could not have conducted enough number of tests, and we don't have enough number of hospital beds also. Somehow, the first wave of corona was somehow managed. India did not feel the severe impact of corona in the first wave. But what again government has forgotten is that, like what happened in the plague in 1920s, exactly 100 years back, the second wave is always much more dangerous, much more serious, much more catastrophic than the first wave. When the first wave had subsided on its own, the government declared that we have prematurely, they have declared that we have defeated corona. And the government was more interested in bringing back the economy on track, which is also needed. So it has opened up everything in a premature manner without ensuring the necessary uh, safety mechanisms. And the government did not use this time period to again take what we call preparedness measures. In Europe as well as in America, the government could see that the second wave was extremely terrible and they were facing so much of problems related to oxygen cylinders. But the government never really thought about it. It was under the illusion that we have already controlled corona. We don't have to do anything. And then some of our ministers and other top level executive have made wrong statements like we have completely defeated corona and we have become Vishwaguru also. We were never prepared for the second wave. On the other hand, politics have already taken place. Politics started dominating. Elections were held to 4 states. This is where we talk about the failure of institutions. Failure of institutions is one of the important reasons for disaster management failure in our country. Here, election commission was a complete failure. For example, in a state like Bengal, elections were held in more than 9 phases. By this time, the number of cases recording in India were more than 2.5 lakh cases per day, going to 3 lakhs also. But election commission has refused to curtail the election process to merge different phases of elections. It had come out with so many innocuous excuses. This is where we fail. We talk about the failure of institutions. This is where again judiciary has been a complete failure. You need judiciary to come and correct the mistakes committed by legislature and executive. Legislature and executive are always guided by political populism. That is the reason why our constitutional forefathers gave independence to judiciary. But unfortunately, judiciary also has failed. It could not come to the rescue. Even media also, we could see the failure of media there to highlight the issues. Media was also, you can see how all of them combined together resulted in such catastrophic consequences during the second wave of corona. We can understand the failure of disaster management in India with the help of this corona in the second wave. The Prime Minister and Home Minister were busy campaigning in Bengal. They were not even in Delhi also. The Chief Minister of Maharashtra bitterly complained that whenever he would call the Prime Minister's office, he would always get the reply that Prime Minister was busy in electioneering. And when the Prime Minister and Home Minister, who is responsible, please remember, this disaster management department will come under the Home Ministry. And another weakness, failure here is that the entire disaster management was centralized in the hands of official working in the PMO. It was completely centralized in the hands of official working in the PMO. And we had this Prime Minister's Advisory Council consisting of so many medical professions. Again, there is a problem there. Most of them do not have what is called integrity. They are more than willing to dance to the tunes of the political executive. Political executive wanted them to tell the people that everything is fine. But at the ground level, the situation was completely different. By the time month of April had come, by the time the government had woken up to the disaster, it was too late. It was too late. April and May months were the worst months as far as India's independent history is concerned. In the last 75 years, if you have to talk about the worst period for India, it has to be April and May of this year. It was not even during the post independence days wherein people were massacred because of the migration from Pakistan to India, India to Pakistan. It was not even 1960s when people could not have food. It was not in 1971 war. It was not at all other things. But the worst period can we say is those 2 months of 2 months of April and May. In those 2 months, there was no central government. There was no state governments. You could see people were dying because of lacks of oxygen cylinders. You could see huge amount of queues in front of graveyards also, because so many people are dying that it was not possible for the graveyards also to perform all the last rites of the people also. You could see on the roads people, literally crying and dying because of lack of oxygen cylinders. Neither the state central government nor the state governments, none of the state governments, we are not talking about any political party here, neither central government nor none of the state governments are willing to accept openly that they have a problem with oxygen cylinders. And this is where we can see complete failure of disaster management in India. Why? Because it was a failure of all the institutions. Judiciary was a failure, legislature complete failure, executive total failure. And bureaucracy, the less we talk about them, the better. And health infrastructure completely collapsed. Media, instead of highlighting the issues, it had become too nationalistic, and anyone who reports about them were criticized. On the other hand, in a state like Uttar Pradesh, you could see these dead bodies floating in the Ganges, shallow graves, and the government justifying everything, saying that it is quite a common practice. And it is said that, according to unofficial estimates, at least 5 million people died in India. There is not even a single household in the country. You must also be knowing. There is not even a single household in the country wherein they have not heard about a person known to them, close to them, acquaintances who have not died of corona. And this, the government's complete failure in preparing remdesivir injections. They were selling at the price is only 10,000 rupees. The price is on 1400 rupees. They were selling for 1 lakh rupees, 1.5 lakh rupees in the black market. Again, the government simply was not prepared at all. And on top of it, another major failure here you can see here is the private hospitals. In metropolitan cities, the private hospitals are charging anything between 1.5 to 2 lakh rupees per day for treatment of corona, for which they don't know anything. How to treat corona they don't know, but they were charging 1.5 to 2 lakh rupees. The government simply has failed. Government has simply disappeared. These private hospitals were looting people in the name of corona treatment. The government was a complete absent. It was criminally absent. Even in tier 2 and tier 3 cities also, small cities and towns, they were charging 1 lakh rupees per day. There were no beds available. Why? Because between the first wave and second wave, the government simply has not really bothered to create the necessary infrastructure. During the first wave, the government, central government along with the state governments have created temporary beds. But by the time the first wave was subsiding, almost every state government has closed down all those temporary shelters, thinking that it is over. This is where you can see complete failure of disaster management in India. And when the second wave had come with such a ferocious impact, we simply did not know what to do. For those 2 months, we could not see either central government or state government. What we have seen was a ruthless exploitation by the private hospitals. What we have seen is people dying, falling like 9 pins. What we have seen is in a long queues in front of graveyards. It was a complete massive failure on the part of the government. And according to government own testing, more than 4 lakh people every day tested for corona. Again, they simply don't have any kind of better health facilities also. Most of them are forced to fend themselves. This is where you can see complete disaster management. Now, coming back here now, you can see in Europe and America, they are witnessing what we call third or fourth or fifth wave, whatever it may be. And South African variant also had come, which is more dangerous. In India, this Delta variant was developed. It had developed, which proved to be extremely dangerous. The government never allowed, independent, research into these variants by the scientific institutions, research organizations. They simply did not do anything. Why? Because It is politically extremely inconvenient for the government to accept that there was a serious problem also. And now you can see in the last 5 months or so, 6 months or so, the government is behaving as if there is no corona also, nothing has happened also. And we are again back to normal. Did we improve our health infrastructure in the last 6 months? Not at all. Are we ready for any third or fourth wave of corona in our country? We are not at all sure. Please remember, in most of these countries also, people have taken vaccines. In spite of taking two vaccines, still, what we can see nowadays is that these countries are literally shivering right now. Again, all these European countries. Hungary went into complete lockdown. Germany has said that it has no option but to go for complete lockdown. America also cases are going up like anything. So this is where again, we might believe that the government is committing a mistake, thinking that it is over. So this is where, what is the reason why this disaster management in India is such a monumental failure? As you can see it on the screen here, it is a monumental failure because disaster management is never an issue that decides electoral outcomes. It is not. It is never an issue that decides electoral outcomes. Unfortunately, in India, how electoral outcomes are decided? In India, electoral outcomes are decided on the basis of the factors like caste, religion, subsidies, and corruption, reservations. Disaster management. Already you can see Uttar Pradesh is one of those states which has been worst affected due to corona. And people are saying that it will be very easy task for BJP to come back to power again in Uttar Pradesh. Why? Because this is where again problem with disaster management in India. People have very short memory. They forget all these things. Already people have forgotten what happened during the months of April and May. Months of April and May, when the country was witnessing literally the death of dams. And people have already forgotten. You can see all over the country, people are not even wearing masks when they go out. They are not maintaining any physical distance. And they are not getting vaccinated also. Why? Because, as we mentioned, people have very short memory about the disasters and impact of the disasters. And that is the reason why. That is the reason why disaster management is a failure in India. You can see here, we have seen high levels of corruption in relief measures. The victims are never given relief on time. Most of the time, what happens is the relief goes only to those sections of society who do not deserve them. And we have never really bothered to create necessary infrastructure to prevent disasters. Take this year budget also. Our budget has probably said that the government has increased the health budget to 2.3 lakh crores. Out of that, maximum amount of money will be going only to what we call vaccine only. Rest of the money will be going into other aspect of health budget, what we call as providing drinking water, sanitation. That was also included in the health infrastructure. Preventive measures, which is fine, no problem. But what is the government doing to improve what we call these primary healthcare centers? It has been found out during this corona times that in Uttar Pradesh, a person has to travel at least 20 kilometers to go to the nearby primary healthcare centers. In rural areas of Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, people did not even know that they had contracted corona. They did not even know that they died because of corona. But there was so much of fear. So what happened? That is the reason why all of them were buried in shallow graves near the river Ganges. Clearly shows the monumental failure of what we call health infrastructure in our country. And did we see any kind of improvement in the last 6 months? Not at all. The primary healthcare centers continue to remain absent. They are conspicuous by their absence rather than by their presence. And none of the state governments really bother or concerned about improving infrastructure at the local level. Forget about at the top, at the local level. And still, there is too much of exploitation by what we call private corporate hospitals because of the complete absence of government healthcare infrastructure. This is where we say the disaster management is a failure in India. And on the top of it, what we have seen, as you can see in the next point here, political populism dominates. Why? Because as I said, the government simply is not at all interested in disaster management because it is never a political issue. On top of it, in the name of disaster management, what is the government doing? It is extending free food grains scheme to poor people. That is where the problem is. Political problem. On top of it, the government comes out with more flagship schemes. Ayushman Bharat was not that much successful. So you can rephrase it and you will call it as Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, PMJ. But what are you doing to improve infrastructure? That is where the problem is. And of course, attitude of bureaucracy. Our bureaucracy still consider themselves as the masters and treat people as servants. The most important reason why disaster management in India is a failure is because we have a situation wherein people have short-term memory regarding the disasters. I said people already have forgotten this corona in our country because they have to lead their life also. They have to get on with their life. They cannot be thinking about disasters. They have to earn their livelihood. They don't have any other option also. That is the reason why floods are forgotten. That is the reason why air pollution will become an issue in Delhi only during the months of November and December. After that, the government forgets. And what is the response of the central government to air pollution in Delhi? Central government has informed the Supreme Court that by within 2-3 days we can see winds coming from northwesterly direction, so that the pollution levels will come down. This is what disaster management for central government. This is what exactly disaster management for central government. They are expecting that the northwesterly winds come, northwestern winds come, and they can improve in a system in Delhi. They are hoping that there will be some kind of winds that will reduce the pollution of Delhi. Beyond that, central government has no other plan. That is what Supreme Court was extremely critical of also. Supreme Court is point blank asking the central government, what kind of message are we sending to the rest of the world? We attend those conferences, COP 26, wherein we forcefully talk about environmental degradation. We forcefully talk about increasing pollution. And what are we doing here? That is what Supreme Court. What kind of message are we sending here? Why? Because nobody is interested in what we call disaster management. As the next point, you can see it on the screen here. The government simply has failed to ensure balance between the concepts of economic growth and ecological sustainability. And whenever the government is deliberately and consciously denigrating the ecological systems, the excuse given by the government is they are more interested in satisfying the basic needs of the people. For example, you take the case of these subsidies which are given, water subsidies, power subsidies. We know these subsidies are causing huge amount of damage to our ecological systems. The government says that our farmers are poor, that is the reason we are giving subsidies. Political populism. This is where the problem is. And then the most important reason why disaster management is also a failure is because lack of awareness among the people about the consequences of disasters. People simply don't know what are the consequences. During the corona crisis also, people simply did not even know that they were dying because of corona. They don't even know, because in India people have what is called a fatalistic attitude towards disasters. Fatalistic attitude towards disasters. And whenever any disaster strikes, we think that it is part of our fate. We think that we have done something wrong in our previous life, That is the reason why the God is punishing us with this kind of disasters. We don't have any scientific temper. We never ask the questions. This is where we can talk about the reforms. What should be done? What should be done? First and foremost, we must recognize the disasters. What we must have is scientific outlook. We must develop a scientific temper. We should leave behind this kind of fatalistic attitude and recognize that there will be disasters, there are disasters, and we must come out with solutions. The government should have long-term policies. You know, the government should have, you know, we should have long-term policies. Vaibhav, class timings are morning 8 o'clock. Our public administration classes are morning at 8 o'clock, 8 to 10:30. Our public administration classes. This is a YouTube class, right? So coming back here, what we are saying here is that we must recognize disasters. Most of the time, the failure of the governments. YouTube class timing is evening 5 to 6. It will be like this tomorrow, Monday and Tuesday. For the next coming 3 days, our YouTube class timings will be the same. Evening 5 to 6. And you will be informed about the topics also. Right? It will be 5 to 6. Evening 5 to 6. And I will be taking up mostly what we call these general studies topics only, mostly which are important for your mains this year, which are important for your mains this year, right? So obviously this corona disaster management is a topic which is very very important for your mains this year. So what should be done? Recognition of the disasters and coming out with long-term policies to reduce the impact of disasters. For example, take the case of corona crisis. What is the long-term policy here? The government should focus on creating health infrastructure, right from the lowest level, that is primary healthcare sectors. India has one of the lowest India has one of the lowest doctor people ratio in the world. India has one of the lowest doctor people ratio in the world. And what we have to do is that we have to spend. Disaster management is part of both part of your public administration as well as general studies paper 3. They are asking questions in our ethics case studies also, disaster management. Right? No, public administration class is not free class. It is not free class. It is for, I have started the classes only yesterday. It is a plus classes. You have to take admission, I think, there. Right? These YouTube classes are free classes. These YouTube classes are free classes. So coming back here, what we are saying here is that the government should focus on mitigation and prevention. We should improve health infrastructure. We should ensure better equipment. We should ensure better, personal, more personal. We must ensure scientific evaluation of the impact of disasters. We must create awareness among the people about the consequences of disasters. We should involve local self-governments and NGOs in disaster management. We must involve media in disaster management. We must involve other organizations in disaster management. We must make sure that in case of the specific disasters like corona, we must make sure that these natural disasters are not followed by man-made disasters like lockdown crisis and migrant crisis. We must make sure that the solution cannot be worse than the problem. When the government had come up with solution to corona, when it had come down with the solution to corona, the solution was much worse than the problem itself. And what are we saying here? We are talking about what the government has done by imposing strict lockdown. And the government must be willing to spend enough amount of money on disaster management to make sure that this disaster management becomes an integral part of development process. There should be close coordination between the central and state governments. During the corona disaster, what was the problem? Everything was micromanaged from Prime Minister's office, which ultimately led to the collapse of the entire system. Those who are sitting in Prime Minister's office in Delhi simply did not know what was happening at the ground level. Whatever the response the government had come out with as part of this crisis management was itself a big disaster. And even initially, the vaccine program was also a big problematic one. But later, the government has made the course correction. This is where we talk about, this is where we talk about being proactive and dynamic. And what is required at the end of the day is complete change in the attitude of the government. That their tendency for political populism is what that is resulting in causing more problems for the people in the name of these disasters. The government must shed its political populism, think about long-term consequences of its policies. For example, during the second wave of corona, it was the political considerations that had stopped the government from imposing lockdown when there were even 4 lakh cases also per day. The government was wrongly thinking about economy, whereas they should have thought about saving the lives of the people. And then you have to be very honest with your efforts. You have to be very honest with your mistakes. The government was not willing to recognize the mistakes it had committed also. It was not willing to accept the blunders that it had made, and that resulted in much more severe crisis. At the end of the day, what we say is that disaster management in a country like India, which is poor, underdeveloped, backward, absent of infrastructure, depends on proactive, dynamic, and visionary leadership, which is willing to accept the problems, which is willing to be proactive, which is willing to uh, come out with innovative solutions, which is willing to ensure participation of stakeholders, which is willing to fix accountability, which is willing to sacrifice what we call their personal interest, selfish personal interest for the sake of the country. This is where we can say that disaster management can be successful, and that is what is required here, right? I think the time is also up, so we can stop it here today. Tomorrow we will come out with another topic related to your general space at the same time, evening 5 o'clock. Till then, take care of yourself and best of luck.